What should I wear for the Mustang review today? Ooh, should I wear this? Or should I wear this? Or maybe this? Oh, or how about this? Or this? Ooh, I like this one. Nope. Or this? No, that's like gray on gray. No. Ooh, this one. This is the one right here. I'm gonna wear the... Oh. That's a bit awkward. What's going on, everyone? Jax here, and today we have the 2020 Ford Mustang EcoBoost with a performance engine upgrade convertible. Did I get all that? Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way right off the bat. This is an EcoBoost convertible that cost 40 grand. And I know, some of you are already clicking away to go watch the guys from Throttle House and Jason Camisa and Randy Pobst thrash a Mustang GT500 because you feel as though you need a testosterone injection after hearing the words Mustang, EcoBoost, and convertible in the same sentence.
Bye, guys.
And I get it. Even if I tell you that this Mustang has the performance engine upgrade on the EcoBoost 4-cylinder that raises horsepower to 330, recalibrates the engine so that torque comes on a little bit earlier in the rev range, and is basically a detuned version of the Ford Focus RS's power plant, you'll still feel compelled to grow a beard, go chop some wood, and start wearing Axe body spray. But that's really unfair when you think about it. If this car wasn't called a Mustang, and it was free from all of the sort of history and mystique associated with the Mustang name, would you immediately reject it? It's a 330 horsepower rear-wheel drive coupe with a manual transmission. Enthusiasts have pined for such cars. They do it all the time. Cars like the Subaru BRZ and the Toyota FRS. But then they arrive powered by leftover hair dryers, and we all lament the lack of horsepower, the terrible exhaust notes, and the association with Vidal Sassoon. How many times have we asked Toyota and Subaru to slap a turbo on those cars and really let them off their leashes to see what they were capable of, only to be given decal packages instead? So is this the car that we all want when we talk about such things? Is this the turbo 4-cylinder coupe that so many enthusiasts sort of build in their minds? It's a tunable, turbocharged 4-cylinder engine wrapped in an elegant coupe body that doesn't look like it was found at the bottom of a river on CSI Miami. Wow! Powering this Mustang is a 2.3-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, making 330 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque, all running through a 6-speed manual transmission or an optional 10-speed automatic. More than 90% of the engine's torque is available at just under 3,000 RPM, which is pretty good. In addition to the uprated power, the sort of engine performance package comes with an active exhaust, which is an absolute must in my opinion, because it gives the engine a wonderfully kind of throaty growl. It's one of the best sounding four-cylinders that I've heard in quite some time. It not only helps to distinguish it among the Mustang lineup, it helps to distinguish it from other cars in general. It has multiple modes, but the only mode that should matter to you is track mode because it's the loudest. Because if you would drive a Mustang, there's a certain level of obnoxious that, that kind of comes with the territory. So I just sort of adopted that characteristic while I had it for this week. Even a GM fanboy like me can admit that Ford's Coyote V8 in the GT is a phenomenal sounding engine. So it's nice to see Ford put in some kind of work and time and effort to make the four-cylinder engine have its own sort of distinct exhaust note and personality. Here, take a listen. See? Not bad at all. And if you're hating down in the comments, it's probably because you're gonna hate on it no matter what, because it's a four-cylinder, it's not a V8. But as four-cylinders go, it's not bad. Unfortunately, since this is a convertible, the EcoBoost handling package is not available on this particular car. It's only available on the coupe. And that's kind of a shame because it comes with the very good MagnaRide suspension as well as even stickier Pirelli Corsa 4s, all for the very reasonable price of $4 grand, which is not really that bad when you think about it. It also comes with a 355 limited slip differential, which is available on the convertible, and this one has it. If you keep your options in check, you can get a maxed out performance engine and handling upgrade Mustang EcoBoost Coupe for right about 36 grand, which coincidentally is the starting price of a stripped out Mustang GT. That raises some interesting questions. I mean, we'll get to them in a second. I'm just saying it raises some interesting questions. I was just sort of priming you for, you know what, let's move on. Cars like the Mustang cover a much wider buying demographic than their highest output models would lead you to believe. For every GT350 and GT500 shredding tires and car show crowds, there are dozens and dozens of four-cylinder and V6 powered Mustangs driven by everyone from sorority girls to girls who want to be in a sorority. Some are even driven by former sorority girls, which means they have Greek letters affixed to the rear window and smell faintly of White Claw. But what if it wasn't White Claw? What if it was Michelob Ultra and the person driving it was actually an automotive enthusiast? What if the four-cylinder Mustang left Madison, Maddie, Madeline, and Madison behind?
That is so fetch.
In search of someone more like Dax Shepard. You know, this guy. Okay, you know, Kristen Bell's husband. Okay, he's an automotive enthusiast, right? He's hosting Top Gear America. I mean, this is a good-looking car. This blue-collar Mustang behind me sits on gorgeous 19-inch wheels wrapped in Pirelli 255 with tires all around. It has subtle ground effects that really enhance the already attractive and compelling Mustang shape. Come on, Ford guys. Even you have to admit that this generation of the Mustang is vastly better looking than the two generations that came before it. Those two generations of Mustangs were kind of like that middle-aged guy who keeps referring to his heroic days of high school because he just can't let it go.
It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
And it even actually looks good as a convertible, even if the convertible top results in sort of Camaro-ish levels of rear visibility. But I don't think the convertible detracts from the Mustang's overall aesthetic. My point is this is a good-looking car. It's a good-looking Mustang. And any automotive enthusiast should be proud to be seen in it, no matter what badge is on the front and no matter what engine is under the hood. So, just as importantly, how does this Mustang handle? How does it ride? How does it drive? are in the Mustang EcoBoost convertible. Right off the bat, one thing that I want to point out is that you have to drive this car in sport mode, in my opinion. I don't know what it is about the regular mode, but I felt like the throttle it required more of a mash to it to sort of shift smoothly than I really prefer. But once I set up the car in sport mode, which has the sportier steering, the sportier throttle mapping, it was a lot easier to drive smoothly. The clutch engage is relatively low in the travel, and the shifter is really notchy in a positive way. It feels pretty good in the hand. It kind of clicks into gears. We're not talking Honda smooth here, but it is definitely a pleasant gearbox to work with. However, because that clutch engages pretty low and pretty quickly, I liked having that throttle a little bit more aggressive to where I could just sort of brush it with my foot and I could shift gears really smoothly. So in my opinion, having this car set up in sport mode is sort of a must. The downside of that is that you have to select it all the time. I am not aware if you can set sport mode to be the default. You have to click the toggle switch down here every single time. A little irritation, but I think the reward of driving it in sport mode is totally worth it, and it really helps the car to kind of come alive and feel more like what it's capable of. Also, it's worth noting, you should always leave the exhaust in sport or track mode because it sounds fantastic. It's a nice turn right here. The Mustang front end is really good. The steering is really good in terms of accuracy. Steering feel, to be honest with you, is kind of bandy. It doesn't have great steering feel, but it's very accurate, especially in the sport mode that I have it set up in. I think that's a must. All right, so here we are on the handling road. I've already had the Mustang up in the mountains, so I've really kind of seen what this car is capable of doing. The handling road is more of just sort of bad pavement combined with a few notable dips and this first corner, which the Mustang doesn't really have any trouble with. One of the things that I have mentioned before is that the front end of this Mustang feels very light, feels very darty in a good way. It kind of dives into corners and it doesn't really seem to push very much, despite the fact that it has the power going to the rear to initiate understeer if there was a lot of understeer to be found. The ride on the handling road is pretty good. This is a sort of firmly damped car, but there's that big bump, not too bad. However, I think it's the sort of rebound, it's the upheaval after the bump that kind of throws off the suspension a little bit. I noticed this when I was in the mountains. The Mustang handled pretty well. There's not a lot of roll. Side-to-side motions feel good. The front end really feels nice. I love the way it sort of dives into a corner. It handles smaller than it is. It's a really kind of lightweight front end. You don't really think that you're driving a sort of pony car, you know? I'm not saying you're gonna get it confused with a Miata or anything, but it definitely doesn't feel as brutish as you'd expect like a Mustang to feel. I will say one thing that surprises me about this car is I don't think it feels as fast as it potentially is. My suspicion is that it's kind of geared long. I feel like the engine kind of winds up and the gearing is longer. I actually looked up the gear ratios and final drive ratio compared to my C5 Corvette, which has similar horsepower. So the Corvette has 350 and 350 torque. This has 330, 350 torque, very similar. And the Corvette was geared shorter in the first couple gears, which makes it feel much quicker off the line, even though the grunt is virtually the same, 350 pound-feet of torque. This wasn't so much an issue in the mountains once you got up to speed, but when you're kind of driving around town or you're pulling out into traffic, I don't think you really feel like you have 330 horsepower underneath your right foot. I would like to see what this engine could do if you kind of shortened up the gearing and really let it punch itself off the line. The turbo spools up relatively quickly. It doesn't feel laggy at all. I just don't think you're seeing that full capability from a standstill or from a slow still like what we're doing right now. If I were to downshift and floor it, you wouldn't see me like get thrown back in my seat, at least until I hit the Honda in front of me. Then you would see me get thrown through the windshield. That would be unpleasant. That's third gear from a roll-on. just doesn't feel as quick as I think it could be. Now, let's talk about in the mountains. I did not have the camera and the microphone on in the mountains because, you know, you want to be concentrating, paying attention, being smart, driving safely. In the mountains, this car was really good. I had it matched up against a BMW M3 and a Porsche 911, which might be stacking the deck a little bit against the Mustang, but it acquitted itself well. It definitely was no slouch against two vastly more powerful cars. And most importantly, don't compare it against those cars because that's a stupid comparison. Most importantly, it was fun to drive. It was entertaining. I can't stress how good this front end feels when there's not a giant lump of V8 sitting on it. It just makes the car feel more tossable. It feels more airy in here. There's better visibility than in a Camaro or something like that. You can't even compare it to like a Dodge Charger Challenger or whatever because they weigh 9,000 pounds and they don't handle it all. This is a much more pleasant car to drive sort of aggressively. It's worth pointing out that the Mustang convertible does not come with the handling package. It's not available on the convertible, it's only available on the coupe. And that means you have to make do with sort of the standard suspension tuning. You do get a limited slip diff, but you do not get the Magna Ride shocks, and you get the sort of regular Pirelli P0 summer tires instead of the Corsa 4s. Now, what did that mean in the mountains? Not much, actually. This car did very well. The Pirelli P0s are solid, okay? They're 255 width all around. They handled incredibly well. Everything I threw at them, not even remotely a squeal. Keep in mind, this is a press car. I'm not gonna bin it while I have it for a week. No protests from the Pirellis. They ate up everything I threw at them. The ride quality is pretty good, actually. The sidewall width is a fair size, so you have decent ride quality from them and not too much road noise. And they just devoured those mountain roads. They really lent themselves to the handling of this car. Very good experience on those Pirellis in the mountains. My point is, if you're buying the EcoBoost Mustang with the performance engine upgrade, that's totally fine, but you're probably not buying it to go thrash it in the mountains. What I did was definitely overkill. So you don't really miss the performance package because you're probably not trying to extract those last 2/10. If you drive this car at 8/10, you'll be perfectly happy. If you're gonna track it, you'd get the coupe anyway. Oh, and how about the stock brakes? How did they stand up to the abuse of driving in the mountains? 100% fine. They never faded. We weren't going too hard. The sweepers in the North Georgia mountains are sort of famous for being really big and like wide and long, and they're not like the tail of the dragon where you're having to brake at like 100% braking all the time because you're always in a corner. Acceleration roll from second gear. Not bad. But my point about the brakes is the same as the suspension. You're not buying an EcoBoost convertible to go time attack the mountains. So all of this puts the EcoBoost Mustang in sort of an interesting handling category. This car costs $40,000, but you could get the coupe with the handling package and the performance engine upgrade for around $36,000, which is the entry price of the GT. That also puts it in the same category as cars like the Civic Type R, and it's quite a bit more expensive than something like the Scion FRS Subaru BRZ that I mentioned earlier. So what is this car's competition other than the Camaro 1LE in 4-cylinder V6 trim? I think the V6 Camaro is more comparable in terms of power and handling. I think body roll is really well controlled in this car. It doesn't lean. We were on some pretty aggressively cambered corners in the mountains, and I felt like the car, I was able to focus on what the tires were doing. I was able to focus on the people around me. I wasn't really concerned that the car was leaning so far I could reach out and touch the ground. The car was composed in the mountains. It's really just, if I have one complaint about the way it handled in sort of perfect roads, because let me be honest, a lot of the roads in North Georgia have been recently repaved with new rumble strips added. It's almost like they know that people go up there to drive those roads for fun. Interesting. But if I have one complaint in that kind of perfect driving environment, it would be that lack of rebound control. It just made the car a little bouncy in certain situations, and that did distract me from what I was doing. I always felt like I knew what the front Pirellis were doing. I always felt confident that I had a sense of their level of grip. In fact, once or twice, I was in a decreasing radius corner and was surprised that they had more to give. I thought they were gonna begin to push, and they just were like, nope, and they just tracked straight through it. But the overall chassis management is a little distracting in some situations. One other thing I'll mention, and this might be blasphemy or heresy depending on how you look at it, I would be curious to see how this car does when driven aggressively with the 10-speed automatic transmission. With more ratios to choose from, I wonder if the engine would feel more alive, if it would be easier to keep it in the power band. When I was in the mountains, I noticed that the sweet spot of that torque curve is in that kind of 3,000 to 5,000 range. But in certain situations, in order to keep it there, I had to shift from third to fourth and then back to third in order to keep the engine in the power. It was almost an unnecessary shift, an unwanted shift. I didn't want to make that shift because I knew with the road curving or going uphill the way it was, I was gonna have to immediately shift back down to third gear or second. But it was like, to keep it in that range, it was right on the borderline of wanting to shift from third to fourth. So it just made some of those situations a little awkward, where you're having to think about the shift and take your mind off the road and what you're doing. I wonder if the 10-speed auto would be better at keeping the engine in the sweet spot. I know, such things are not to be uttered out loud, in public, or in a car, as the case may be. And disclaimer, I'm just hypothesizing. I have not driven the 10-speed automatic Mustang, so I don't know. Could be awful. Yes, now that I've gotten used to this clutch and shifter in sport mode, very good. Really enjoy driving this car. Still want to try that 10-speed auto though. Just scientific method.
There's not much to say about the Mustang's interior that hasn't already been said before, but I will note a few things as a first-time Mustang driver, at least a first-time driver of this generation of Mustang. For someone my height, 6.5 feet tall, there is loads of room, and it was not hard to get into a perfect driving position. The steering wheel, shifter, the pedals, especially because this is a manual transmission car, it is fantastically roomy in here for a taller person. The materials are fine when you consider the Mustang's starting price, but at 40 grand, they start to feel a little cheap. For that kind of money, the plastics are a little low rent and a little too high up on the dash. I don't mind the sort of fake brushed metal look. It's an attractive look. It's a nice kind of texture imitation, but the overall quality of the plastics is pretty poor. This particular model doesn't have any sort of next level amenities, but it does have Sync 3, and so it has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto and all that kind of stuff. So from an infotainment standpoint, it's fine. Sync 3 is okay. I talked about it some in the Expedition review. I don't mind Sync. Like most infotainment systems, it takes a little too long for the screen to change, for inputs to be received. It also tends to add a step or two when, you know, a button push would suffice. Also, FYI, the Mustang interior has toggle switches. Always a good thing. I mentioned that in the Slingshot review. Toggle switches, yes, please. The seats are quite good. They're pretty comfortable. They do a good job of holding you in place. They have good lumbar support for someone with a jacked up back like mine, so I enjoyed the seats. I've heard that the optional Recaro seats, I don't know if they're available on this particular model. I've heard that they're a little restricting, especially for people that might be a little larger than me. But I like these seats, and I didn't have any trouble in the mountains with them. They're good enough for someone, especially a bigger person like me. A smaller person might find them a little wide, but I was fine with them. I think they're good. The gauges are easy to read at a glance. They have sort of the classic font, and they have the little things like ground speed and stuff, which is kind of fun. I don't mind that. I do think the info screen in between them feels like it's kind of wedged in there. It's a little bit small. I just left it on the digital speedo display. It's not as interesting or comprehensive as Ford's digital dash, which is available in the Mustang GT. You won't miss the gauges if you've never had the gauges. It's sort of like Dignity in that way. If you've never had it, you won't miss it. But it's out there if you're willing to pay for it. The GT, I mean, not Dignity, but I mean, I guess everything's for sale for the right price.
Coffee's for closers only.
Oh, and in case you're wondering, the convertible top is a one-handed, one-button affair. You just twist the top handle, push the button, and it goes back like this. So, should you buy a Mustang like this? Well, let's break this question down sort of into two categories. The first is the EcoBoost in general. Is it a worthy version of the Mustang that can satisfy the automotive enthusiast? The simple answer is yes. When combined with the performance engine package and the performance handling package that you would get on the coupe, the EcoBoost platform makes for sort of a compelling enthusiast car that could be further tuned and enhanced for even more impressive results. Also, it's a better car in many respects than the Camaro, which is its sort of closest competitor, obviously. I don't think I need to tell you that. If I needed to tell you that the Mustang and the Camaro are the close competitors to each other, you're probably watching the wrong channel. It's just easier to live with day to day. The visibility is so much better. It's not particularly better or worse in terms of overall quality, but I think it is the more attractive of the two cars, if I'm being honest. While the Camaro might have a slight dynamic advantage, you have to be really caning it on a mountain road to tell the difference. And I think in terms of the ownership experience, the Mustang would probably be the more satisfying of the two to live with every day. That's assuming, of course, that you can overcome any brand biases that you might have and look at this comparison I'm talking about objectively, which in terms of Mustang and Camaro is like impossible. But hey, I'm trying. I'm a GM fanboy. I like the Camaro. I would probably buy the Camaro just because I'd probably buy the Camaro. But I probably wouldn't buy the Camaro for this price. I'll come back to that in a second. Let's talk convertible first. As a performance-oriented convertible, this car does make a certain kind of sense. However, its $40,000 as tested price is pretty steep, especially for something that is essentially a narrowly focused toy. That being said, the performance engine upgrade is comprehensive and it does enliven the car quite a bit. Not to mention makes it vastly better looking with its beautiful 19-inch wheels and sort of ground effects trim. I think it looks awesome. Think of it this way. What other convertibles can you get with this level of performance at this price? The list is pretty short. There are not many options available. And depending on your tastes, this might be the best looking option. If your tastes are good, it is the best looking option. The top is solid and folds at the push of a button. The structure is solid and stiff, and I heard nary a creak and rattle during my time with it, whether the top was up or down. And the Mustang wears the convertible top well. It looks good as a convertible. It doesn't detract from the Mustang's overall aesthetic. So if it were my money, what would I do? What would I buy for that 36 to 40 grand price range that you find the EcoBoost coupe and convertible in? Well, that's simple. I'd buy a Honda Civic Type R.
That doesn't make sense.
Let me explain before you rage quit like someone who just got sniped at the end of a Warzone match. The Type R is way more practical. It feels as fast or faster in sort of normal day-to-day driving, and it's genuinely more fun to drive. I know, how could that be possible because it's front-wheel drive and this is rear-wheel drive? I don't know. I don't know how Honda does it, but it is. If I were looking to spend sort of upper 30 grand-ish money on a car that I was gonna live with and drive every day, that would absolutely be my choice. Sure, the Mustang and the Camaro and maybe even a Planter Sport might be better looking than the Type R, but if you truly love the act of driving, if you truly enjoy being behind the wheel of a car, then that's the only view that should really matter. Plus, that's a heck of a lot better than sinking 10 grand more into your BRZ to try to make it faster than a toaster oven. Guys, if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel and ring the bell if you would like to see more content like this. I had a great time with the Mustang convertible. It is a very good car, a very compelling alternative to the Camaro. As a GM fanboy, I can happily admit that this is in many ways the superior of the two. Now, if you go up the ladder and you get to the more performance-oriented versions, that'd be a whole different ballgame, and I would love to bring that content to you. GM and Ford. But if you're keeping the price reasonable and it's a car that you're gonna drive every day, or it's something that you just wanted to have a convertible to kind of enjoy the fresh air, personally, I think the Mustang with the performance package is the better alternative. I 100% think you should get the performance engine upgrade because it really does make the car feel a little more special and it makes it look a heck of a lot more special. But at the end of the day, we all fall into our biases and that's probably what's gonna inform your decision anyway. So I hope you enjoyed this video regardless of which brand or company you choose to support, just to be entertained. I sure have fun making them. It's a privilege to bring these videos to you guys and get to experience these different cars, and I like having my views challenged. I like that I thought the Expedition a couple reviews ago was better than the GM Tahoe and Suburban, and I like that I think that this Mustang is better than the Camaro because competition makes them all better, and it's so much fun to see them evolve over time. We truly are living in a golden age of the automobile, one that I know will change eventually with the electrification of everything. Stay tuned. I've got a video I'm working on right now about the Mustang Mach-E and Tesla Model Y, sort of a stats comparison thing. I hope you'll join me for that one. As always, ride safe, drive safe. Let me know what you thought of the video down in the comments. Agree, disagree. I'd love to chat with you down there. I'll catch you in the next review. Peace. I just went through like 5 shirts and now everybody at the park officially thinks I'm nuts. Oh my God. Wow! Yeah. I literally cannot snap. It is so hot, I cannot snap my fingers. Thanks for the turn signal there, buddy. That was helpful. Going through a school bus drive to do lap times. I'm kidding. I'm not doing that. Boop! Oh. Failing on so many levels. This is gonna be a lot of fun to edit. And by a lot of fun to edit, I mean it's gonna be awful to edit. I should not have come this way.